Good morning to our participants. I can see you're all joining our Learning Lab. I'll just wait a few moments while people are connecting and their audio is kicking in. We'll kick off. Welcome again to those that are joining. We're just giving everybody a chance to log in and have their audio connected. Okay, I will get started. So I would like to formally acknowledge the traditional custodians and the true sovereigns of the land on which we meet. Capire's office resides on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and I acknowledge and celebrate their continued connection to land, water and community, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge and pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which the City of Launceston lies in Tasmania, which is made up of the Stony Creek Nations. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and elders past, present, emerging and any joining us today. So my name is Mollie Rashleigh and I'm an Associate and Director at Capire, and I'm joined today by the wonderful Megan Brown, the Strategic Community Engagement Advisor at the City of Launceston. And we also have Charlotte, one of our consultants at Capire, who'll be helping out with tech and will also be facilitating question and answers and some polls that we'll be doing shortly to find out a bit more about who's in the room. So welcome to our Learning Lab. This Learning Lab has come at an exciting time for Capire and the City of Launceston, as just a few weeks ago, the project we're focusing on today won an IAP2 award, which we are incredibly proud of. So just a quick note about our Learning Lab. So for those of you who are joining a Learning Lab for the first time, Capire's Learning Labs are a space to hear the latest on engagement practice. As the name suggests, it is a learning space where we share tips, best practice examples, discuss different ideas, methodologies and challenges. We also want to make this a place for you all to share your knowledge. So feel free to pop your examples or your experiences or relevant projects and tools in the chat box throughout the webinar. We'll also be using the chat box to manage just all the comments and questions. So please feel free to just ask them as we go, but we will be answering or be getting to the questions at the end of the session. So I've got about 45 minutes together. We'll spend about 20-25 minutes on the presentation and then allow the remaining time for question and answer, and we'll hopefully get through as many questions as we can. So we are here today to talk about an engagement approach we commonly describe as the campaign approach. The project where this approach was realised and implemented is the City of Launceston's Tomorrow Together project. So Megan, give us your best elevator pitch of what Tomorrow Together is.
Okay, so it's the campaign approach to community engagement. So the best way to explain it is that rather than asking for feedback on individual projects, we asked up front what was important to them. It's broken into 6 themes that cover everything that council is involved in. We still undertake the business as usual activities, but the number of these obviously has been significantly reduced due to the development of the Tomorrow Together program. So it combines projects under one of the 6 themes. We go out to the community on a variety of topics in one hit, rather than sort of, individually over multiple times over the year. An example of it would be an upcoming theme we've got is the well-designed city theme. So that's one of the 6. And we're going out on a variety of topics such as tourism, events, transport, sustainability, emergency management, open data, and the information that we collect on these topics go into formulating first drafts of related strategies and plans, such as our sustainability action plan and emergency management plan and things like that, that we would normally have gone out individually on. Does that summarise it?
That's pretty good. So we do know that it is a different approach to how Launceston's done it in the past and to how a lot of local governments are running their engagement, which is why we think this is worth discussing and sharing. We think there's a lot you can learn from this approach, and we also think it can inspire organisations to think differently about how they engage meaningfully and thoughtfully with their communities. So that's what we're here for in terms of our agenda. So we'll be discussing the process for how we co-designed the overarching Tomorrow Together campaign and got the organisation on board. We'll also get into a bit of the detail on how the engagement was delivered and some key highlights from across the first phase of this campaign. We'll discuss how we increased the internal capacity and got everyone excited and involved in delivering it. And then Megan's going to share a bit about how the approach has evolved and what the next sort of big challenges are for the campaign. And then we'll end with some time for questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to hand over to Charlotte now, who's going to run some polls using Mentimeter. We just want to find out a bit about who's in the room, and yeah, so over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Molly, and hi everyone. Before we jump into the details of this wonderful project, I thought it'd be good to take some moment for us to hear where everyone is joining us from today. So on your screen, you'll see a QR code. You can scan that from your phone, or go to mentimeter.com and enter the code, or alternatively, you could just hit the link I'm sharing in the chat room right now. Okay, please bear with me while I shift the screen to Mentimeter. All right, I think we've got around 27 people on the Mentimeter already. That's awesome. And if you have encountered any technical issues, please pop them in the chat. I'll try my best to help you. Okay, I think most of us are here already. So I'll start with our first question. Where are you joining us from today? So I imagine there'll be a few people coming in from Melbourne or Victoria, but it'd be interesting to know whether people are joining from other states or even other countries too. Okay, so I think most of us are from Melbourne. We've also got people from Launceston, a few from Brisbane, Central Victoria, Perth even. That's awesome, thank you. Regional Victoria, Gippsland, Geelong. Oh, someone from St. Louis, USA as well. Someone from New Zealand, Elwood. That's awesome. I think we have most of us are from Melbourne or Victoria. Some are from metropolitan areas, some are from regional, and we've got a few from other states and even other countries as well. So that's awesome. Thank you. And now we'll move on to our next question. So this question is about, we want to learn about whether some of the challenges that City of Launceston faces resonates with your organization or what you're working on. So back in 2018, when the City of Launceston launched the Tomorrow Together campaign, it was facing a couple of challenges, like an overwhelmingly large project pipeline, really stretched staff. People may be feeling really burnt out with the large amount of projects and workload. Maybe people had a really stretched budget within their organization to deliver the engagement projects they have wanted to. Maybe there was a lack of internal collaboration around engagement delivery, or a lack of consistency in how and when how we engage the public. So we've already got a few responses in. I think one of the main challenges people share is the lack of internal collaboration, and we'll definitely touch on that during the sharing from Mollie and Megan. Okay, the second one we have is, lack of consistency in how and when we engage the public. So maybe there's some difficulties around how can we deliver some of the information consistently and clearly that are easy to understand for everyone in the public. And the third most popular one is really stretched out. So everyone is really busy and maybe having difficulties to manage all of their workload. All right, I think that's everyone. Thanks everyone for your responses, and we'll keep that in mind throughout our sharing. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop that in the chat room or the Q&A box. And yeah, and I'll pass that back to Mollie and Megan to share their wonderful projects and stories about the project with us. Back to you, Mollie and Megan.
Thanks, Charlotte. Well, it's great to see that the challenges that the City of Launceston faced at that time resonate with a lot of you, because I think there'll be a lot gained through this session and through what we're going to share next. So we're going to get into the detail now. So Megan, can you kick us off by describing where the organisation was at prior to the establishment of Tomorrow Together?
Okay, so there was no engagement team. I had been the communications senior manager over a number of years, and I'd done it off the side of my desk. And when I say that, I mean we've had an engagement HQ, Your Voice, Your Launceston site for at least 12 years. It was stop-start. We used it when we needed individual projects to be engaged on, and normally it was with great urgency. There wasn't a lot of thought that went into how we did it. I had 2 children. I was on maternity leave. I resigned from the communications manager role, and then was approached by our infrastructure general manager to come back and help with infrastructure to engage on their projects. So at 2 days a week, I re-entered the organisation. Obviously, I was fortunate that I knew everyone extremely well. I'd had a position where I'd worked across the organisation and reported directly to our CEO at the time. So that part was the easy part for me, but I know that that would be the challenge for many people in community engagement. So first day on the job in infrastructure, I went around and spoke to some of the managers, and I worked out that there were over 40 individual projects in infrastructure that needed engaged on. So that sort of blew my mind. And I went and then spoke with my director at the time and thought, you know, how are we going to possibly manage this? We're going to fatigue the community. Even if I was 5 days a week, I wouldn't have got through half of those projects in 12 months. And so it came at a time in the organisation where they were really ready for change. There was a lot of emphasis on community engagement. There was pressure from outside the organisation to engage better. So it couldn't have been more perfect, really. Given that management were ready for serious change, we decided that we would go out for tender and engage an engagement organisation. So I did a bit of research behind the scenes. We went out to tender. And then we met with, 3 of the preferred candidates and found Capire. So, and this all happened over a very short space of time. Then, we met with Capire, they came down, presented to us, and I think the next day we pressed go on it all. And yeah, and then Tomorrow Together and the process began.
Did. So yes, we were welcomed into the team, and I think we came back almost the next week to start understanding a bit more about where the organisation was at. So the first step for us was really, we wanted to hear from as many people as possible, because we knew this was going to be a big challenge and it was going to require a lot of arms and legs. So the first step was that co-design process and bringing the whole organisation along the journey of defining the challenge and coming up with the solution. So the activities that we kicked off with, we did a desktop review of the existing policies and tools that the City of Launceston had. We then worked with the project leads more to understand that project pipeline and all the individual engagement needs, timeframe, stakeholders, risks, things like that. And then we did a series of workshops with officers, the management team, the executive team, and councillors. And we learned a lot of what Megan's sort of shared already around there was this real appetite for change and their real appetite to do something, big and different and exciting that would get everybody excited. We heard all those challenges around staff feeling that like their resources were stretched, that there was a real inconsistency in how they engaged, how they reported back to the community, and that transparency, and they wanted to just do all of that better. So we took away some key insights from that project, which then informed an engagement strategy. So we needed a strategic whole of council approach to how it delivered engagement, and that also needed to deliver some opportunities for cultural change, as well as hearing from a more representative voice from through council's engagement. We knew that engagement opportunities needed to be longer and deeper, so starting the conversation earlier on in the projects. And we needed to find we needed a standard engagement findings report model so that we could consistently report back to the public. And council also really wanted to have the bigger and tougher conversation. So not waiting until they had something to share that was on the table, a draft document. They wanted to bring the community into the big challenges that the city was facing, the region more broadly. So we moved on to designing the solutions following all that information that we gathered, and we presented three options back to council across all those teams again. One was improve the existing systems and make them more efficient. So that's essentially continuing as was, but tidying up to just really improve that consistency and adding some things on around data management and reporting. The second option we looked at was place-based engagement, so focusing attention locally. This essentially was like a mini campaign where we'd go out to all the neighbourhoods or regions within the municipality, and we'd go there once and we'd talk about all the projects that were impacting them or that they would be interested in. And then the third option was the overarching campaign approach, which would run for 18 to 24 months, and it would group all 40 projects under those big themes. So we then went back and we tested with each of those groups which option they preferred, and overwhelmingly the support was for the campaign approach. So Megan, what jumped out for you why the campaign approach was the preferred option?
I think it was just trying to do the best one first. We were able to pull resources, so we had the finances to go the whole hog, so to speak. We could see that up front it was going to be the more expensive option, but that down the track it would provide the most benefits. The campaign approach, you could see that people would become more organised because of it. It would mean that the organisation was going to have to work together in a way that it hadn't been before. You could see the outcomes were just going to be a lot better. It meant that people knew in advance what other departments were going to be dealing with, rather than seeing things as they happened. It just made everything more cohesive, probably would be the best. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So from the campaign approach had a few different names, but it ended up we landed on Tomorrow Together, which I think is also the name of a pop band somewhere. It's okay, we dominate that term now, Tomorrow Together. That's our brand. And the six themes were identified. So we had the resilient city, a well-designed city, a unique and prosperous city, a mobile and accessible city, a social, inclusive and fair city, and a focused and sustainable council. So these really were developed based on the project pipeline and the big conversations that council wanted to have. So sometimes it was a very specific project that council needed to deliver on. For example, the transport strategy was engaged on under a mobile and accessible city, and the community development framework was engaged on under a social, inclusive and fair city. But in other themes, so for example, unique and prosperous, there's some big challenges that didn't necessarily have a strategy that were going to come out of it straight away, but the council could see that they needed to be talking to their community around the impacts of population growth, or the population growth slowing down, or how they needed to attract more industry and retain workers. Those big challenges that are not necessarily at the forefront of what people are thinking about each day, but that it impacted a lot of work that council was doing. So that's how the themes emerged, and we went from there. So for each of those themes, essentially a working group was formed that involved all those project leads and relevant departments, and we ran co-design sessions that really worked on looking at the synergies between those projects. So as Megan mentioned, it gave that visibility for everyone to see all those projects mapped out, and to start to look at, oh, we need to find out similar information to you. So that helped us to then develop the engagement questions that would be used throughout that theme, and then explore the best engagement tools. So we'd start to look at, well, who are the target stakeholders? We know broader community was always part of the conversation, but maybe there were specific groups we also needed to target, and what was going to be the right method to engage them. So there wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So we'll now share some of the highlights around the campaign approach and what it looked like in practice. So communication and education material was central to build informed participation, because this was a really different way council had engaged with the community before. They knew they also needed to do this a bit differently. So they had set up an online engagement platform that was previously referred to as Your Voice, Your Launceston. That's now merged right into the Tomorrow Together brand that the City of Launceston's come up with. We also developed a foundation document which was used to launch the campaign and educate the community about why council was doing things differently and what they could expect to learn and engage on under each of the 6 themes. So when that was sent out to council's database, people were also able to sign up to the themes that they were going to be most interested in. And then when we got to that theme, they'd be communications would go out targeted to them. And then there was sort of the more standard communication tools around use of postcards, social media posts. City of Launceston's makes great videos for their social media that are really successful and get a lot of traffic. So if you ever want some tips on how to do your social media, make it really friendly and accessible, City of Launceston does a great job with that. And then we did community radio advertisement, fact sheets, pop-ups, things like that. In terms of the engagement activities, each theme looked a little different. As I mentioned, there wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach, except every theme had online engagement, and there was always a survey of sorts involved. And then we also had for the first 2, we went with major events, what we often call in the community engagement world speak outs, which is essentially a big event where you can come and there's normally stations that you can move around. And so that was a way to have stations about particular projects or particular topics or subtopics within those themes. And they worked really well. Unique and Prosperous City is an example of where we did things a bit differently, because we really were targeting more to industry and to businesses. And so we did these evening talks where we got speakers to come and present on those tricky topics or those complex topics. And that one looked a bit differently. We had about 130 people come to the evening talks, but I think over
the 900
views. So they were all shared online and continually watched. So that was a really strong education theme, that one. And then, another example. So what else we were able to do is, I know that we actually received a question about how we captured broader views. So one of the benefits of these major events that we did was that we saw a huge increase in the number of young people participating in the engagement. So Resilient City, which was our first theme, so that was the first speak out we did, attracted over 700 people, and 40% of those people were under the age of 20. And it was similar for the well-designed city, which we're going to watch a little video on. Sorry, mobile and accessible city, which we're going to watch a bit of a video on. So what we saw was the teams got really creative in how they both promoted the engagement but delivered the activities. So they went and caught a rare crayfish and put it in a tank, and people came from all over Launceston to learn about the crayfish, which then council was able to start a conversation about the estuary and the management of the estuary and the importance of protecting the natural biodiversity. So that's sort of there was so many creative examples that the team came up with all on their own, which really helped attract people from all over the place. And the use of the social media and the videos to give sort of insights into what you'd experience when you came along to that event also really helped. So we might just jump to the video, which Charlotte's going to share. This just gives a bit of a snapshot to one of the major events that was delivered.
Hi, I'm Michael from the City of Launceston. Today we've left St John Street and the Avenue closed for a little longer after the Christmas parade so that we can enjoy our streetscape in a different manner. So we've got a jumping castle behind us in the mall, we've got a scooter competition happening. Further down St John Street we've got a different layout to the street, so some street trees, some on-street seating and some additional bicycle lanes, just to give the public an idea of the opportunities that we have in remodelling our streetscape in the City of Launceston. This event is also part of our Tomorrow Together engagement that has been going on all of this year. This particular theme is a mobile and accessible city, so we've got some tents set up down in the Avenue where the public can provide some feedback about what they enjoy about the transport options that we provide in the city and how perhaps we could make them a little better.
So hopefully that's given you a good little snapshot into what the engagement looked like in delivery. Getting the organisation involved in the design and delivery of Tomorrow Together has been a critical success factor behind this program. And Megan's done a wonderful job in getting the organisation on board. So Megan, if you can share how this happened and some of the learnings along the way, that would be great.
So probably the secret to the success was getting everyone involved and the whole organisation understanding where we were at. We decided that given there was only myself, we would put together some community engagement champions, which they were across the organisation, every directorate department. We picked people, or the managers picked people that, wanted to be involved in it. They then undertook some training that Capire delivered, which I think was really helpful. Community engagement was sort of a newish thing. It was, everyone knew what communications were, but they probably didn't understand how you could deliver community engagement differently. So they all got trained up, and it was those people that sort of spread the word amongst their teams. They then would turn up for all of our face-to-face engagements, and it also meant that people that never ever had met and would probably never have met across different departments got to know each other really well. So it was actually a really good team building process, more than anything. We had councillors involved. We had senior managers, the CEO would turn up to events. There was just never anything else undertaken by the council where you would bring together people like that. So that was definitely the highlight, I think, for us.
Awesome. So we wrapped up the 6 themes. So that's just a little snapshot of how we got everyone involved. So we wrapped up the 6 themes. The council reviewed the approach and quite excitingly decided to continue with the campaign approach. So we'll just end the slides there because I've got a few questions for Megan before we kick into opening up to everybody else. So Megan, what was the key factors behind council's decision to continue with the campaign approach?
Oh, well, I think we had such high engagement. Previously, when we'd undertaken single projects, we might have got 90 or 100 people at best contributing, and it certainly wasn't demographically representative of our population. So we ended up with very high engagement. We had the good community representation. It has become cheaper. What used to be done in isolation and in silos across the organisation is now done out of the one budget. It's consistent, but most importantly for me is the council never used to report back on any of our engagement findings. We would take something on board, we wouldn't take other things on board because while we might have heard from people, we didn't necessarily know whether that was the community's view. So, most excitingly now, people want to report back to the community. So we can't wait to scramble around, put the data together and then let the community know what they've told us, because we can be confident that we've reached that broader cross-section of the community. So, that's been the main reason going forward. It's just meant we've been able to develop strategies and plans. We've had the preliminary information that we would not normally have had to start developing strategies, so we can confidently go out and use information that we've collected 24 months ago and know that it still works, and say, look, you told us this. We already know 900 members of our community said that, transport options were important to them. So we can then start with a strategy that's already fairly well informed.
And I guess how has the campaign approach evolved? We started off with these 6 themes that were based on a pipeline, and how has it now evolved that those 6 themes were delivered on?
So the 6 themes, we did the full rotation. Since we've completed the 6 themes, we're now on. We're 2 more further on. So we've done a social, inclusive and fair city twice, and we're about to embark on the well-designed city. Probably what we've noticed is there will be some themes that we use more than others. We're doing a lot of work currently on our service levels. So theme 6, which we use as a focused and sustainable council, is something that we probably won't revisit as frequently. But the likes of a well-designed city, a social, inclusive and fair city, and a mobile and accessible city, I can see that they're themes that really interest the public and that we've constantly got things happening in those areas. It's probably now, because we've collected all this data, significant amount, we had been putting them into reports at the end of each theme, and in each report there were pop-ups explaining to the community, look, you've told us this and this is what we're doing with the information, or we're about to start this project because of things that you told us about last year. It's now included in this year's budget. The problem we've got now is we have all this data, and rather than have people reading through reports to find out the information, we now have enough data that we need to come up with a smart system so that people can delve into it and more quickly than reading reports. So that's sort of where we're at the moment, is how we can present this information to the community differently and on an ongoing basis.
So that's the next big challenge for the campaign. Yeah. All right, well, we might jump into some of the questions. So I'll just pass over to Charlotte, who's been taking note of the questions coming through.
Yeah, we have received a couple of questions in the chat room and the Q&A. I think just for context, some of us are interested to know what is the size of the council, how many staff do you have, and how does that kind of speak to maybe the resistance to the approach that you proposed for this campaign?
Okay, so we're Launceston. and in our municipality, we have just over 70,000 people. We also, when we engage, we do get people contributing from around the outskirts of Launceston, because we are the Greater Launceston. There's municipalities around us that use all of Launceston's major facilities. So we learnt very early on that we wouldn't exclude those people from the engagement. So whenever we engage now, we have a drop-down suburb list where we can actually collect information from just outside of Launceston. We have around 700 staff at Launceston, so we are a large employer within our region. In terms of resistance, to be perfectly honest, we didn't strike a lot of resistance at the time, because I guess when you sell it to someone and say, look, I can make your job easier, I can collect up information for you a year in advance so that, you know, you've got something ready and you haven't had to do anything. That made it very easy. We were just really ready to start down this line. And it was a smarter option. So yeah, does that answer?
Thanks, Megan. I think that touches on some of the second questions. We have questions from Vicky and Karen around how do you measure the success of the engagement and communications? For example, how do you ensure we're capturing a really broad view from the community and just not the minorities that usually show up to engagement events? And how do you know which were the most successful communication methods?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. Mollie and I were just discussing earlier. So the first, the themes that we had where we engaged a great number of young people were pre-COVID, when we could have face-to-face catch-ups. What COVID did for us as a city, and I'm sure that it did the same for you know, the rest of Australia and New Zealand, was it meant people had to go online. So where we would previously have looked at results and maybe had to bolster up some of the demographics, maybe by phone survey, just to become more representative, we haven't found that. And in fact, in the last theme that we've just completed, I prematurely went ahead and organised some phone surveys to the demographic 55 and over. And then horrifyingly, when I actually went and at the end of it looked at the data, we had heard from 2 times as many of the over 55s online than what we ever had before. So I ended up with a very top heavy data. And then interestingly, and we haven't touched on this yet, was the power of our social media at the City of Launceston is phenomenal. I think we've got over 35,000 followers on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and have been for quite some time. So to square up some of that data, we actually went out with targeted social media campaigns to get, firstly, the under 50s, and secondly, we targeted the under 40 males. And that was really, really good at squaring up, you know, how representative the sample was of our community. So I guess I would suggest that, you know, you're having to use all the traditional methods, but then all the new ones as well. That's really powerful in getting, you know, in hearing from everybody.
And I'll just add one activity that we did was at the end of each of the initial campaign. When we started, we did a survey of the team members involved who then shared feedback. So we asked how they felt the engagement had gone and the data collected and the delivery of it and the methods, so that we were able to also hear from the broader team what their experience of the engagement was, to then inform the following themes. As well as, particularly for the in-person events, we also did participant evaluation. So we had little A5 cards that people were able to complete at the in-persons.
That's great. And then we have a very similar question from Jane and Natasha around, well, because obviously this project is really great at capturing the strategic views of really the big picture of what's happening in City of Launceston. But how do you still get to manage other priorities or smaller projects such as other maybe engagement for smaller projects and specific facilities and infrastructures. How do you still go out to the community to engage on these topics, and how do you ensure that level of detail of the information of those projects are delivered to the community?
Okay, so in our infrastructure department, we always had a staff member that would be doing all the things like direct mails to various streets and houses that were affected by our day-to-day infrastructure activities. So that continues to happen. Since the development of the program, they have now resourced another full-time person. So there is a 5-day-a-week person and myself at 2 days a week. We try and split it so that I'm more focused on the strategic Tomorrow Together themes, and then my counterpart does a lot of the internal engagement with staff. She's reinvigorating the community, the Champions program, because obviously over 3 or 4 years we've had people either elevate to management status or they've gone to other jobs. So she manages a lot of that on a day-to-day basis. What we find is that the Tomorrow Together, it covers off a wide number of projects in one theme, but it may be then, and a good example of this is the transport strategy. They collected up enough information through the mobile and accessible city theme to contribute to the development of the strategy. And what we find is very efficient and works well is the different tools that we then use after the Tomorrow Together process. So they drafted up their transport strategy, and then we used a product, and this isn't a sales pitch, but you might be interested in it, a product called Conveyo. So that's K-O-N-V-E-I-O, I think, which is an interactive PDF. So that we would draft up the strategy, we'd put it up on this interactive PDF, and people can comment directly onto the strategy. They can tell us whether they think they've got it right or wrong, or and that tool enables you to have comments open so the public can see what everyone else is commenting on, or closed off, and it generates a great report, and you've got, you know, some quite specific engagement on that. We use a lot of other tools as well. You know, we use Infogram to report back. We use the Balancing Act. So, for example, we collected up some big information on parks and playgrounds and things, and then when we go and we're doing individual playgrounds, neighbourhood specific, we use another tool which is a part of the Balancing Act, which goes out and they get to spend the budget and choose the play equipment that they like the best. So I guess we sort of start with Tomorrow Together and then we work down, but we've had to become very clever with how we follow up on the individual projects so that we can manage it with the current staff levels.
That's great. So that sounds like that's a use of tools, and through the campaign, you manage your workload internally more effectively to allocate resource and communicate that more clearly with the community. That's great. Yeah, and I guess the other question people asked was also around reporting. So how do you go about data collection and reporting writing? How do you share it with the individual teams or back to the community on there's so many different topics that you touched on in the campaign?
Yeah. So when we first started Tomorrow Together, we would collect up all this information on each theme, and we wouldn't necessarily highlight what we were using it for, just because we didn't want to overload them with information. How we've probably progressed from there is we actually now say up front, this theme is going to cover off information that we will use to develop various strategies. Sorry, what was the question again?
Reporting on different key themes.
Yeah. So the report writing to date, we've actually, in most instances, Capire's put the report together, and then it comes back to me and we look at the results and we look at projects that are coming up in the next 12 months. We look at suggestions. I then look and report back via like a pop-up on a PDF that then says, which I spoke about earlier, hey, look, you told us this, and you might be interested to know that in the next 12 months, we actually have this already as a project, or, hey, because you told us this, we are now going to prioritise this as well. So that's what I was talking about earlier when I said we've now got these reports that hold all the information, but it would be nice to present the data in a way that was a little bit more palatable and could be searched more easily.
So to clarify, there was a report written for each theme, and then Megan would work with the teams around how they were using that data, and then that would be added in as a layer into the report. So as a community member, you'd be reading back over the report, and there'd be a little pop-out box that have said, this has informed this draft strategy, or and there's been a recent council decision in response to this to look at X, Y, Z. So people could see that in a way that they hadn't been able to before. And then that's all being combined into for the first sort of series for the campaign into the One Big Tomorrow Together report. And now the big challenge is looking at making that data more accessible now to the broader organisation, which is, as Megan touched on, the next kind of big step for this campaign. So we have reached time. I think there may be a couple of questions we haven't got to. So what Megan and I will do is have a look at those and reach out to people if we can. But I think most of them we have gotten to. I just had one wrap-up question for you, Megan. A local government rings you straight after this Learning Lab and says, Megan, we want to do the campaign approach. What are the first things we need to get right or have in place? What would you tell them?
Phone Capire. I would say that if you want a campaign approach to be successful, then as the community engagement specialist in your organisation, you need to make friends with everybody. You need to really understand the different departments, what they do, and then probably, I've probably got two more. You need to engage your councillors. We've got a new batch currently. We've got 7 new ones who I met with 2 weeks ago, and they are really engaged. They, they understand the importance of community engagements. They want to help out. They are fully prepared to share everything on our social media channels, which obviously, for them to do that will capture, almost our entire community. So I can't wait to use them for this next theme, to launch it and promote it and see how it increases our response rate. And so I think probably the fourth thing is you really need to build on your social media presence, because that does play a critical factor in efficient and cost-effective community engagement.
Thank you, Megan, so much for joining our Learning Lab today and helping to talk about the campaign approach. Thank you, Charlotte, for coordinating us. And thank you to all of our participants for your thoughtful questions and for being interested and wanting to learn more about this project. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon or day, and till the next Learning Lab. Thanks, everyone.